The U.S. military could lose the next war it fights. That's according to a report released Wednesday by the National Defense Strategy Commission. It's a group of 12 national security experts selected by Congress. The report says, quote, America's ability to defend its allies, its partners, and its own vital interests is increasingly in doubt. The report goes on to suggest the U.S. might struggle to win or perhaps lose a war against China or Russia. The report echoes what we heard from Defense Secretary James Mattis in January. He warned of growing threats to the U.S. military during a speech at Johns Hopkins University.
In this time of change, our military is still strong. Yet our competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare: air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, and it is continuing to erode.
Michael Morell is a member of that commission. He's also a CBS News Senior Security contributor, as well as the former acting and deputy director of the CIA. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Walk us through the main conclusions of this report.
Elaine, the main conclusions of the report are that the United States is at more risk today from a national security perspective than it has been in decades. It argues that we have not kept up with our competitors in the world, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, that they've been working to advance their conventional capabilities while we have been fighting unconventional wars for the last 17 years. They have caught up to us from a technology perspective, and that many of our advantages have eroded, and many of the things that you need to fight have actually atrophied. So it says that we are in a very grave situation with regard to our ability to defend ourselves, our allies, and our interests abroad.
You say a grave situation. Just how urgent an issue is this for the U.S. Armed Forces?
It's urgent enough for us to say in the report, Elaine, that if the U.S. had to fight one of these adversaries, particularly Russia or China, we would face probably insurmountable losses in conducting such a fight, and it would be difficult to win, and we could even possibly lose such a fight. So that's how serious this is, and the members of the commission, and I agree with it fully, have a deep sense of urgency that we need to do something about this.
Well, Michael, can you point to a year or a moment when the U.S. lost its edge in a potential conflict?
This has been going on for a long period of time. There's kind of two fundamental causes. One, development abroad, and then two, developments here at home. The developments abroad are what I mentioned earlier, that all of these countries, all of these adversaries have been working very hard to advance their conventional military capabilities, while for the last 17 years we've been fighting a counterterrorism war and a counterinsurgency war, and we have not kept up. And then, Elaine, the developments here at home are essentially the 2011 Budget Control Act, sequestration, which resulted in significant cuts to U.S. defense spending. So you put those two things together, and that brings us to where we are today.
Michael, I know we could talk about this at such length, but give me a sense, when it comes to China and Russia, you say we have not kept up. So it sounds like it's a combination of the fact that you're saying we have fallen behind, and that they've also advanced. They've grown in their capabilities and their technologies. What's behind that? I mean, when you look at sort of the geopolitical landscape, it is true we have been fighting sort of this unconventional terrain here in the U.S. At the same time, though, some in the Pentagon, I would imagine, would argue that they haven't taken their eye off the ball, and that they have maintained a focus on those two very countries, China and Russia.
So, Elaine, if you look at the statement that the Defense Department put out today in response to our report, and you sort of read between the lines, my interpretation is that the Defense Department is saying we essentially agree with what the Commission is saying. So they understand the severity of where we are. Let me give you a very specific example of what we're talking about here. So what the Chinese have done is the Chinese have put together a series of weapons defense systems that would in a war situation with China make it very difficult for the U.S. to put forces into the Pacific. These are called area denial weapons. The Chinese have advanced them significantly over the past few years. And so in a Taiwan conflict or a South China Sea conflict, it would be difficult for the U.S. to put its forces into position in order to fight. And that's how we used to operate. We would wait till something happened in the world, and then we would put our forces in place. And the Chinese and the Russians watched that, and they learned, and they developed these anti-area denial weapons. So that's a great example of what we're talking about.
So given that, Michael, what are some steps the U.S. can take in the coming months to try and address this gap?
So, Elaine, what we're recommending are a whole host of things. New capabilities, new operational concepts, which is a fancy way of saying figuring out better ways to fight. Significant changes in how the military develops technology and its relationship with the private sector so that we can take advantage of private sector technology. And not surprisingly, a significant increase in resources. The Commission didn't do a fine-tooth look at what the exact number should be, but we're basically saying a 3 to 5% real increase in defense spending for the foreseeable future, which is significantly above what's planned today.
And you think that the political will exists to get that kind of funding level up?
So I'm hopeful, Elaine, that the sense of urgency that we've spoken with in this report will generate the kind of conversation that could lead to that political will. But I'm not naive either. To actually fix this problem, we need a political consensus in both parties that it needs to be fixed. And we all know the difficult political situation we're in. So, am I optimistic or pessimistic at the end of the day? I guess I'd have to tell you I'm pessimistic, but I think we have to fight the fight and let it be known what the risks are to the nation unless we take action.
A sobering report, Michael Morell. Thanks very much, Michael, for your time.
You're welcome.